Thank you very much, Professor Kelly. Incisive and concise, I think, overview. Just a quick observation, you know, the UKIP party, Nigel Farage, and you mentioned some of the narrative that we've heard. It strikes me that there's some parallels, comparatively speaking. If you look at the demographic patterns, the structural divisions between the rural and the urban, you know, you had the demographic figures and maps of the regions. So generally, London is very much pro-Remain and you know, rural, more less developed areas and more kind of pro-Leave. If you look across the world, in the U.S., you got the Trump, right? I mean, his base is not Washington, D.C. and Chicago and New York, but in Iowa, he just spoke there yesterday to a raucous crowd. Yeah. In the Philippines, you have Duterte, 90% popularity, unbelievable. But the 10% is mostly urban areas, Manila. So this is something that I think we're seeing as a global phenomenon, not just the UK. You know, maybe this is an era of, like Trump said, America first. Maybe this is kind of a UK first. Now, we have some discussions with their own insights, but I just want to just get your quick view. I mean, you have the hard exit, the soft exit, and the idea of having the cake and eat it too. You know, UK leaves, but you know, they benefits from the single market, but takes no migrants. Right? Let the people, the refugees and the migrant workers stay on the continent, but the UK benefits from the single market. What is your best guess? I mean, this is still an early stage, and I notice in the UK there's a lot of drama. I get these various publications on Boris Johnson. He's much lampooned, but he's a foreign minister. Yeah. Liam Fox, and then this man named David Davis. You know, it happens, the British name, David Davis, and he's in charge of the Brexit. Seems like they're having some delay and procrastinating a little bit towards the inevitable. Yeah. And we'll come to the European view in a minute. But what is your best guess? What kind of a eventual exit, and in how long? Are we talking about 2 years, 18 months, 3 years, or longer?
Well, interestingly, on the very last point, if back in the very early summer, the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond, who I didn't mention, Philip Hammond basically took the view that Brexit would take 6 years. Now, 6 years takes us beyond the current electoral cycle. We have 5-year parliaments with a fixed 5-year Parliament Act, and the referendum is not binding outside of this Parliament. As the Article 50 negotiations and the subsequent treaty has to go to the European Parliament or the Council of Ministers, or in the UK, back to Parliament, triggering, no, that can be done by executive power. But at some point, Parliament will have to take a view on this. If Parliament continues now to be a broadly anti-Brexit Parliament, and if after a general election it comes later still, as Hammond suggests, you may have a different reaction to the deal now, not the abstract idea of getting out of Europe, but to the specific deal that is being presented to us. You could end up with a rather curious view in which the British people reject the deal to leave the European Union. That actually could happen, and of course, if that's what they choose, that is what they choose. So, who leads that discussion? I mean, that is going to be Theresa May. Theresa May has a lot of popularity now. That will change over the medium term, as it always does with political leaders. Her view will be the one that counts. So Johnson is chosen to be the Foreign Secretary, but on the core issue, he will not determine policy. He just won't determine policy. She will do that, and that is clear. Will it be hard, soft? May will want something that isn't either of those things. And She will have some interests that she needs to accommodate. The City of London is one of them. It won't collapse and all go to Frankfurt. City of London is a global financial institution, but it will want to retain its presence, and it exercises considerable power. Universities, for example, there are a lot of voices who will have a say pushing for some compromise. So maybe restrictions on immigration, but with significant quotas for areas of the economy that we need. I suspect that will be difficult to sell, but you never know if there is a change of leadership following the election in Germany next year. You know, there are ways in which Europe itself could offer us some of the things we actually wanted because, you know, the European project decides that it needs to deal with crude free movement and manage that more carefully. But I do think two last very quick things. One shouldn't underestimate the resilience of the European project. For continental Europeans, there is more here than just, you know, domestic or national interest. There is something about, you know, 20th century European history, the position of Germany in Europe. For many of the Eastern European secession countries, there is a big neighbour, and being part of the European Union is important for that too. So there's a lot of other political things going on, which I think makes the European project resilient even with Britain leaving. And therefore that has an important bearing on what comes next.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think also what happens in the interim
Yes.
matters crucially. Let us come to Ambassador Prügel. Thank you very much for agreeing to join. Germany is really the major linchpin of the European Union. The UK has decided to leave, but I think without Germany, the EU cannot hold. And I know that Ambassador was reluctant earlier to say, you know, what the Germans think, but I managed to convince him. You can speak as you like for 10-15 minutes, but you know, the British, they get a lot of cold shoulders now in Europe. They go places, people don't like them so much. Theresa May is being spurned, and you know, the President of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz, says, you know, Article 50 as soon as possible. No delay. So the Europeans, I mean, the finance minister, Schäuble, and Sapin, the French, they say, you know, get it on with it. And so there's a feeling on the continent that, you know, since there's Brexit, well, let's get on with it. What would you say, Ambassador? I mean, is there kind of a blowback, pushback, I mean, a bit of a resentment towards the UK's decision?
Well, good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you, Professor Tittin, and thank you, Professor Kelly, for a very interesting historic view on how we get where we are today, and also a very interesting outlook on what we might expect, including perhaps a Brexit from the Brexit, or I think, as you mentioned, a lot might happen the way down until Britain actually starts the proceeding of Article 50 and we get to concrete negotiations. But you also mentioned resilience of European project, and Professor, you have asked me to, of course, to speak on the European point of view, and that is what I'm going mainly to do. So let me make one thing clear from the very beginning. I think the British people's decision to leave the European was met with a lot of regret, puzzlement, and disappointment in Germany and across Europe. You say the UK's exit from the EU is a bitter blow not only to the UK, to the economy, also European and world economy, but also for Europe as a whole. I wouldn't call it a turning point, as some have. It is certainly not the beginning of the end of the EU. It is a historic break. It is a kind of a wake-up call for those who believe the historic process of European integration, this unprecedented success story that has guaranteed peace, stability, and economic prosperity throughout Europe for over 7 decades, to be irreversible. We are aware this is not irreversible. That said, we should, however, not allow ourselves neither to be paralyzed by shock nor to rush into action for the sake of action. And indeed, I think you already mentioned this, people might be surprised that many of the immediate consequences forecasted by some Eurosceptical analysts actually did not materialize in the aftermath of the Brexit. Political leaders must now in Europe closely work together to draw the right conclusions for the future of the Union. And they are doing so at present. Chancellor Merkel, Foreign Minister Steinmeier have been discussing further steps in different formats to strengthen the European Union in numerous bilateral, multilateral meetings with the European counterparts during the last weeks, in particular at the recent summit of the EU 27 heads of state and government in Bratislava. I will now first say perhaps a few words on what we expect with regard to the proceeding, and then I will come back to what Brexit means for the EU and how EU is going to react. So with regard to the negotiations with the UK about leaving the European Union, we can assume that these negotiations will actually be extensive. The EU 27 has already, however, laid down its terms and its expectations, and there are clear expectations that these negotiations need to be rapid, that there needs not to be cherry picking, while of course the UK, until it actually leaves at the end of the negotiation, the EU, the UK will remain a full member state with all rights and obligations this entails. However, the key question, which will be of interest to all of us, concerns the UK's future relations with the EU. And obviously, this is a question that must first be answered by the UK itself. What do they want? What do they intend? As far as Germany is concerned, however, we want the UK to remain a close partner of the EU and its member states. On the other side, however, we need new and we need fair rules on the future relations. And the President of the European Commission, Juncker, said a few weeks ago that the outcome of the negotiations on these rules cannot be that the UK frees itself from the duties and obligations while maintaining the rights of an EU member state. So we need to discuss this very clearly on both sides so that no room is left for illusions or false expectations on the actual start of the talks. And I believe this common understanding is very important for the upcoming negotiations, and UK Prime Minister May have made it clear in her recent statements that her government does not want to rush into negotiations. She will first prepare a concrete roadmap before UK will actually ask to leave the EU on the basis of the Article 50 negotiations. EU is preparing on its side, but as I said, for us clarity is important, and therefore also time is important. So there cannot be an eternal delay, because insecurity is playing negatively for all of us. EU, what is the EU's reaction? I think first of all, after Brexit for the EU, is it important that we assess the situation honestly. This referendum was not just about Britain, it was about Europe. Many EU citizens as well, not only in the UK, currently do not hold the European Union in high esteem. We have seen elections, reactions in different other European countries. Many people are disappointed because they think the EU has not delivered enough on central promises of economic growth, prosperity, peace, and security. The economic financial crisis has shaken up trust in European cohesion and solidarity in dealing with such crises. Many European countries are still facing high unemployment, especially among future generations, youth unemployment. the EU is still working to find a joint and comprehensive answer to the influx of hundreds of thousands of refugees and migrants to Europe, turbulences in the European neighborhood from Ukraine to the ongoing war in Syria and Middle East, as well as the recent appalling terrorist attacks in Paris and Brussels, are undermining the trust in the EU's capacity to secure peace, stability, and security in Europe. And then there is, of course, the everlasting widespread criticism on the regulatory grace of the Brussels bureaucracy, considered to be too powerful, too much interfering into people's daily life. Whether the EU is actually responsible and to blame for all these issues is secondary. We need to thoroughly analyze these widespread perceptions and take these concerns seriously. At the same time, however, the German government, together with European partners, and some of my colleagues might later on join in commenting this, has made their stand on the EU and further European integration after Brexit very clear. And Prime Minister Steinmeier put this as following in a recent speech. The European unification remains the touchstone of our German policy making. The process of European unification is an unparalleled success story. There we are by the resilience. And there is every reason to be proud of what we have achieved. Under the roof of the European Union, Germany, as well as Western and Eastern Europe, have been united, and we are enjoying, I mentioned this already, the longest ever period of peace and stability on the continent. This European peace project is at the center of our foreign policy, and it must be passed on to our younger generations. And despite all the multiple challenges we are facing at the moment, there are many accomplishments we can be proud of, and in many domains where the European Union has been and is working successfully. And I come again back to the economic crisis. We actually have overcome the most critical phase of the economic and financial crisis, and not only has the Eurozone successfully held together, it has even expanded in the meantime. Citizens of the European Union are enjoying the advantages of a unique European single market with, and I insist on this, its 4 freedoms, namely free movement of capital, people, goods and services. And these are not impossible to divide from the single market. This is a unity of these 4 freedoms. This is our understanding. The EU, with its common foreign and security policy, there also has been a global actor, and we have experienced in many occasions in the past that we can make a difference if we speak with one voice as European Union. I mention only the successful negotiations with Iran that were actually led by the European Union. And many people criticize Europe because they feel powerless, they feel losing control. However, even if this is understandable in a world that seems out of joint with so many crises, especially at a time when globalization is encroaching into many areas of our lives, fear, and this we need to tell to our citizens, is not a good counselor. And withdrawing in a national shell does not provide any lasting protection from these threats and risks. So from our German and European point of view, what need to be done? And again, I need to underline that the following points can only be a very preliminary set of thoughts and ideas, as the assessment and analysis of the Brexit crisis is still underway and will need time, will need a lot of coordination among the EU 27 in order to draw the right conclusions. So generally speaking, it looks like we have taken the achievements of the EU for too long for granted, while today we realize that also the European integration and peace project is not irreversible, but needs our active re-engagement and commitment. We need to stand up for this Europe and better explain its benefits, better explain its benefits in order to regain the trust of the people. And let me add one very personal impression as an EU citizen and a voter. I actually do believe that the EU is facing an image problem, which is also of a structural nature. It has become a widespread practice in our countries, including Germany, of politicians and parties, especially in the run-up to national elections, to blame EU constraints and EU institutions in Brussels for unpleasant and painful political decisions taken by themselves jointly with their EU partner. With this commonly accepted reflex of blaming the EU for everything that is not working or difficult to sell, while claiming the credit for every achievement and for all the achievements of the EU that we have been enjoying in the last decades, we are doing, not doing us a favor and not doing a favor to the EU. We have to show that, we have to show the people in our countries that the European Union is not the cause of this feeling of being powerless and losing control, but rather the best instrument available to us to actively shape the world around us, to actively shape globalization in our European interest and to strengthen our strategic relations with our partners. The upcoming EU-ASEAN ministerial meeting next week in Bangkok, which aims at raising the partnership between EU and ASEAN to a level of strategic partnership, enhancing in particular the strategic and security policy cooperation, is one of the good examples where EU continued and active engagement is shaping global structure, is taking responsibility with our partners worldwide. Especially with regard to our role as a regional and global actor, Europe has to play as a team, coordinate closely, act dynamically. Not Germany, not France, and not even UK, I guess, can assert its interest as successfully on the international stage as we can do it together as a powerful community and union. In tomorrow's world, to say it very briefly, Europe represents our own and only chance to successfully represent our interests and to actively influence the global order. To regain trust, Europe has lost, to regain the trust that Europe has lost with many of its citizens, we need, however, not only to better explain Europe, we are also committed to defend Europe by drawing lessons from the Brexit and making Europe better. And therefore, Europe needs to listen more to the needs of its citizens and to deliver real solutions and tangible results that benefit and that engage the people. And what this means has already been come up in several proposals. Again, this is only preliminary. This is exactly the direction taken by a proposal, a joint proposal forwarded by the German and the French foreign minister, which is also reflected in the last declaration of the summit in Bratislava. Proposal to concentrate our common policy making strictly on core tasks, on core issues, meaning on those areas and tasks which can only be met with common European responses. This, of course, is common foreign policy, foreign and security policy, solutions for improved internal and external security, means concretely. It is, of course, an active common European migration and refugee policy, and it is a European policy for growth, employment, and the deepening of the economic and monetary union. These are the three core issues where European can and must do better than single governments. And finally, we will have to find new ways of working within the EU. And there, the term used by my minister is we need a more flexible EU. A more flexible EU might be a solution for respecting differing views on the further progress of Europe on the one side, while allowing for different speeds for groups of countries who want to go ahead and further integrate with joint solutions in specific areas without excluding anyone on the other side. And I stop here with these preliminary ideas on the consequences of the Brexit for the rest of the EU. Let me once again point out our irrevocable commitment to a strong and united Europe. The resilience indeed is very strong. The European Union is and will remain the centerpiece of German foreign policy. And to finish, I would like to repeat a saying which has accompanied the EU since its beginning throughout numerous cyclical crises, and which has just recently been reminded also by EU High Representative Federica Mogherini. The EU has always come out from each crisis stronger than before, so don't worry. EU is not at risk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Prügel. Very reassuring. I think we all can identify with that. Those of us who know the EU, the European project, who've been to the EU countries, we would want the EU to persevere and to come out of this intact. And the reason is because we don't know how to think otherwise. It's unthinkable that the EU would no longer stay on the bicycle and moving ahead. Also interesting that you mentioned how Brexit could be a lesson, could be a wake-up call for the EU to enact internal reforms, to become more accountable, to be more revitalized, revived, and perhaps to work better in the years ahead. So EU very much still in good shape despite Brexit. Now, if I can ask from our local discussants, 10 minutes each. I mean, please refer to the biographies of speakers from the handouts that we gave, that we offered. But Simon Landy is a Cambridge PhD. He is the Cambridge graduate, and I think he's the head of the Colliers Jardines, and also the vice president of the British Chamber of Commerce in Thailand. And most importantly, I think he has been in Asia for more than 35 years. He knows Asia quite well, Thailand quite well, speaks Thai. So from what we've heard now, Simon, are you upbeat, downbeat? I mean, the Brexit, what it means for the EU and for Asia in particular. We heard a little bit from Professor Kelly about China's anxieties about what's going to happen next, and relations with Japan, and Brexit. If the UK really actually leaves, is it actually good for Asia? What are some of the opportunities and risks? What should we be thinking of in the Asian frame and Southeast Asia and Thailand?
Thank you. Well, I think to begin, I'd like to quote you, Chongkittavorn. I think at one point you said, not on this occasion, that in Thailand, the government, certainly post-Thaksin or since Thaksin, the government is voted in by the countryside and thrown out by the city, by Bangkok. And that dichotomy between urban and rural, as you put out today, is becoming a global phenomenon. And I think in the UK, what we've seen is something very similar, as Professor Kelly's excellent presentation showed. He also pointed out that the difference seems to be in education and the importance of education, and how education, the educated people appreciated the benefits of globalization. I would actually go one stage further and say, not only did they appreciate the benefits, but in general they have received them. And whereas if you look at what happened during the referendum campaign in England, and I was there at the time and travelling around a little bit, I became aware that outside of London and Manchester perhaps, where people in the West Midlands were being told to vote to stay in the EU, because otherwise the financial system will collapse and all these jobs will move to Europe. Well, it didn't cut any ice at all, because these people are sitting in the West Midlands deriving very little tangible benefit that they are aware of from the city, and if you tell them, well, the fat cats in the city may have to get a cut in pay, the reaction tends to be, well, good, let's vote Brexit. And I think that was a large factor, not mainly the only factor, but certainly an important factor in that referendum. In Thailand, I think, and Asia, how we respond to Brexit is it's a mixed bag. Is it good or bad? Well, as far as Thailand is concerned, I think UK exports account for something like 1.8% of Thailand's of UK exports total. UK exports to Thailand about 1.8% of total UK exports, something like that. And the other way around, from Thailand to the UK, also a very small percentage, perhaps about 1%. So and in terms of investment, again, UK-Thai investment is very small. I think if you, just as a proxy for that, if you look at the Board of Investment approvals, something like 0.5% to 0.75% of BOI approvals come from UK companies. So the immediate reaction to what is the impact on the Thai economy is probably negligible. However, the short-term impact is definitely there, because there is tremendous interest from the UK that outweighs the trade relationship. And we often talk about the soft power of the UK in England, in Thailand, and in Asia generally. And I don't know if you can define soft power, but for me, in Thailand, it comes down to three main factors. And one of these is the fact that both Thailand and the UK retain a functioning monarchy that are maybe treated in slightly different ways, but still generally respected in the UK and hugely respected in Thailand, which has a lot of weight in the Thai community. Secondly, of course, we have education and the preference generally for wealthy Thai families to have their kids educated in the UK, which has, I would say, over the last 20 years has become the dominant theme, whereas before it may have been the US. And thirdly, of course, and most importantly, football, where the UK now has 3 football teams owned by Thai entrepreneurs, one of which did extremely well last year and is now playing in Europe, unlike the rest of the UK. So I think there's a lot of influence that the UK has in Thailand that it basically plays above its weight. In the short term, we're seeing quite a lot of interest derived from 2 factors, I would say. One is the 12% depreciation in the currency. So a lot of people in Thailand, who are now much more global than they were a generation ago, are looking at investment in the UK. And of course, it's not just Thailand, it's the whole of Asia. Chinese money, Japanese money, the purchase by SoftBank of ARM, massive deal, 24 billion or something, which happened post-Brexit. Major hotel acquisitions from the Chinese post-Brexit. So a lot of opportunistic capital is moving into the UK on the expectation that things are looking shaky, therefore it's a good time to buy because the future is good. So there's a general optimism, I would say, from that side. On the other hand, more institutional money, which would normally be investing in corporates, manufacturing perhaps, are taking more of the approach we heard from the Japanese, which is warning, issuing dire threats and warning that we're going to up sticks and move to Frankfurt, whereas in fact what they're doing is waiting and seeing. And they won't make any real decisions until the structure of the deal that's negotiated with the EU is finalized. So that means that there's some hot money coming into the UK, and the colder money is taking a wait-and-see attitude. But business continues. People are still generally bullish on the UK. In the longer term, I think the thing to watch for Thai-UK relations is, I would say, a fortuitous situation, in that there is an opportunity, despite the directives of the EU, I'm afraid, for negotiations or informal discussions to begin on a Thai-UK free trade agreement. And this is because at present, and in fact since the 2014 coup, the EU-Thai free trade agreement has been put on hold. And that is unlikely to change, at least until the election, which is predicted for next year. So in the meantime, UK is bound by EU regulations, as we heard, until Article 50 is issued and until the negotiations are completed. So in theory, and in fact in reality, no formal negotiations, or any formal negotiations that took place now, would be in breach of EU regulations. However, the business community, business-to-business negotiations or discussions are likely to start, and may give Thailand and UK an opportunity to reach certain decisions that can be quickly ratified as soon as the EU negotiations are completed in, whether it's 2 years or longer, we'll see. So there is an opportunity there. And I'd also say that fortuitously has coincided with the formation of a new committee called the Thai-UK Business Leadership Council, which was actually an initiative from the Thai side to the UK side, and has led to a group of 10 prominent Thai business groups meeting 10 prominent UK business groups under the auspices of government ministers. And the first of these meetings, which of course will not be FTA negotiations, will be held next Monday. So we're moving forward in a way, and I think generally, as far as Thailand's concerned, the situation for the UK relationship looks quite bright.
Thank you, Simon. I just want to add that this is the prevalent Thai view of Brexit, that it is more benefit than risk for Thailand, that there's some opportunities. UK is 27, and this makes the EU-Thai FTA problematic because it takes a lot of countries to agree to deal with Thailand, especially after the referendum in Thailand. And so I think the UK, as one now, going forward, will have more room to maneuver. And I think people around here, not just Thailand, but maybe a kind of a revival of the Commonwealth ties, I sense. Even in New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia, that the UK on its own is actually more attractive and workable than UK within the EU. That's a local sentiment anyway. Let us go to a real local sentiment. Khun Kavi, senior fellow at ISIS, he's a veteran expert on regional affairs. Do you think the EU has been trying to make more footprints, even in South China Sea? Trying to be a player, but then when you have a multiple number of countries, more problematic.
Yes, very problematic for EU to have a really footprints now without UK. But I'm very surprised by the presentation indeed, because I myself very happy to see England leave EU, because for the first time you will see the real color of UK policy toward Thailand and ASEAN. And I'm very happy that Simon's brought out some resilience point, and I agree with him. Now you have the freedoms to conduct informally with UK, with Thailand. I will see within the next 15 months what kind of progress UK will do with Thailand and ASEAN. Because for a long time, since 1973, UK has said, oh, we cannot do anything because we are part of EU. Now that you are alone, and I want to see UK that is active, proactive, because ASEAN now is 625 million. EU cannot do a good job. It's pathetic because now EU is having a great meeting with Thailand. The second week still could not decide whether should come to Thailand or not. Thailand still have a military regime, and Thailand happen to be coordinating country. Make no mistake, Thailand as coordinating country will direct the future of ASEAN EU. If you treat Thailand badly, it will have a long-term implication on EU. And that has to be clear. And I'm glad that Simon brought out this. I mean, I'm very happy because I think EU alone can do a lot. But EU must, UK relation with ASEAN is very special, but you have not yet shown any indication. For me, during this time, what I would do, if I may? First of all, I would set ASEAN envoy. First, CPR, to make sure you already have camera visit ASEAN Secretariat last year to show that we really interest in ASEAN. But UK has no specific policy toward ASEAN. German has in 1994, Kautsky, very good. France has, but UK no. UK just talk a lot about ASEAN. Now it's the time to show. Secondly, it's a good time for UK to, as a nuclear power, to have any indication, just like China said that we like to execute Chon Face. China said that in 2003, but ASEAN said no, we don't want you. But UK, if UK has any true indication that ASEAN is very important now, this is the time to show it. Thirdly, it's very interesting. EU has already tried to apply, be member of EAS. Now you are alone, you have to have indications that security-wise, EU is very important. UK is very important. UK security profile in EU is very important. Now, alone, you have to show that. So don't rely on the French. The French said that we have to raise the profile in South China Sea. Without you, we cannot do it. So for a long time, UK need to show. Now is the time to show off. And I'm very happy that you mentioned that UK and Thailand will have some underground movement, informal talks about free trade. But your priorities on India and Australia, please make Thailand your top priority. Believe me, potential Thailand is moving ahead, not because of 4.0, but it's something else. So that much is clear. But UK must do a lot more because ASEAN is 625, but so far UK has not yet done very much. So I think this is what I would say. And another thing is that I think UK could accede to Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. For a long time, EU said that we could not. France made a very good decision and did that, above all. France is accede to Treaty of Amity. So now UK have to show its colors toward ASEAN and Thailand. For another question that didn't ask, whether people always ask me, since I comment a lot on ASEAN, whether we will have Brexit problem. No way. People said that, ASEAN is followed the route of EU. No way. You're talking about not apple and orange, you're talking about apple and durian. Because ASEAN focus on national sovereignty, national interest, institutionalized, it's not like EU. And also we don't have free move of labor, even though in Thailand, you think that we have free move of labor. It's not true. We have almost 6 million, only to really register. But we are doing our great job. A lot of people didn't realize this. So ASEAN will move on. We learn a lot from Brexit, because one thing we have to worry about that the inequalities. You know, you already have problems between the archipelagos, ASEAN and also mainland Southeast Asia. So this kind of connectivity, and I think it's very good that Brexit came. Number two, and I think there's also one issue that came into our mind is that EU is very people-centered organization. Even that still cannot take care of the stakeholder, and ASEAN is moving to that direction. It's very elitist, top-down. We want to be bottom-up. Is still far from it. And also, Brexit give us some warning. You know, maybe if you want to review the charter, maybe we'll have some special provision talking about exit strategy, because in ASEAN you can join, but there's no provision said that you can leave. You know, if you want to just leave. You know, get the hell out of here. We don't want to see you. You know, you don't have to have referendum, waste your time. So I think ASEAN welcome EU, welcome UK that stand alone, but so far EU has not indicated that it's really placed ASEAN on the top of its priority. Maybe you have a lot of other things to do. That's it. Thank you.